I'm a 29-year-old female, and this happened to me 2 years ago. I don't live in the US, but the town I live in has a strong American influence, with many American immigrants and tourists. Because of this, the house in my town have a lot of American features that typically the rest of my country doesn't have, such as our washing machines and dryers being in the basements, or a separate little outhouse in the back garden. My house was one of the ones with an outhouse. I'll explain the layout of my house briefly so that the story makes sense. My house is 3 bedrooms, with an upstairs and downstairs. There's a back door which leads outside in our kitchen, and another one in the conservatory. The door outside from the conservatory takes you out into the porch, and if you walk about 20 seconds, you reach the back door accessible via the kitchen. Beside this is the outhouse where the washing machine is kept. The outhouse looks like it's attached to the house, but you can only enter it via going outside. Now that that's out of the way, on to the story. It was a Thursday, and I was home alone because it was my day off while my fiance was at work. He had left that morning, and he wouldn't be home until about 7 p.m. I won't bore you with all the details of what I did that day. Only the activities of that afternoon onwards are relevant. I'd put a load of laundry on at about 3 p.m. I went outside via the conservatory door, and I didn't close it behind me. I know this might sound stupid on my part, but it was only going to be open for about 2 minutes, and I thought it was safe since no one would see the door was open. I was in my back garden after all, and my street is located in a pretty safe area, and many of my neighbors are elderly or younger people with families. The season was also changing into autumn, and since the conservatories trap heat, I figured a blast of some cool air would be good after just getting through a really hot summer. Anyway, I didn't think much of it when I went back into my house and I had settled on the couch to watch some TV. The day went on as normal, but at about 5 p.m., I thought that I heard some movement from upstairs. Now, I was used to the normal noises of the house, so I knew it was an out-of-the-ordinary sound. If you went into mine and my fiance's bedroom upstairs, you could actually hear a creak if you stood in the middle of the room because it was directly above the living room. I didn't feel scared at this point, just confused. It was just me in the house after all. I decided to ignore it though, because I realized I had to go outside and get my laundry out. I'd set it to a 1-hour spin, but it actually ends up taking about an hour and 20 minutes, and I knew it would be ready by now. So I went outside and I put it in the tumble dryer. My fiance's favorite pajamas were included in the wash, and I wanted them to be nice and warm for him when he came home. Again, I settled on the couch afterwards because I was having a lazy day. I'd been seated for like 10 minutes when I heard that same creaking noise yet again, followed by a thumping noise. I froze, and a feeling of dread crept over me. Now, if I hadn't heard the noise from earlier, I would have just assumed something had somehow fallen, and I would have went up to check it without even thinking anything of it. However, the creaking noise from earlier was now at the forefront of my mind now. I'd muted the TV, and I had hesitated when I rose to my feet, unsure of what to do. I tried to be rational, telling myself I was being a drama queen and that houses made noises all the time. The season was changing, and we'd only been in that house for just over a year. So maybe it was possible the house was just settling differently because of a temperature change, and I hadn't picked up on it yet. Besides, if someone was up there, I would know because I had a view of the hallway from the couch I was on, and I would have heard the door open anyway. This is when I started to think about how I technically left my house vulnerable to entry hours ago. But again, I told myself no one could have snuck in because it was my back garden. From the front of our house, you can walk up the side and be in the back garden, but the odds of someone doing that when I had the conservatory door open seemed very slim. So I told myself to get a hold of myself and just go upstairs and look. I couldn't resist the urge to be very quiet as I ascended the stairs, stopping every 2 seconds and just listening hard for any noise. The house was silent. Once I reached the top of the stairs, I looked inside the bathroom and there was nothing out of place. That made me feel better, and I walked into mine and my fiance's room. Our bedroom door was open, but we always kept the other 2 bedroom doors closed since we used one as an office area and the other was pretty much just empty, with only a spare bedside table inside it and maybe some of my fiance's PlayStation games. I looked around our bedroom and I saw that several of my books had fell off the shelf, as well as one of my ornaments. As you can all imagine, this made me feel really uneasy. The way our bedroom is laid out is you walk in from the right, our bed is in the middle. A window is to the left wall right in front of you when standing at the door. Our closet is a sliding mirror, one that you can walk inside a little, and my small bookshelf was on the same side of the wall as the door, and my ornament had rolled across the floor, so it drew my attention right away. I picked 3 books up, and I put everything back. Then I looked towards the closet. It takes up the whole wall, and it has 3 mirrors you can slide. We always kept it open, with a small section of our clothing visible, and the mirrors positioned in a way to conceal the 2 sides of the closet, if that makes any sense. Anyway, I felt a really uncomfortable feeling, and I didn't want to go over to the closet. I walked to the edge of my bed, and I looked out the window. But with the corner of my eye, I was peering inside the closet. I didn't see anything, but I still felt very afraid. Something just felt off for some reason. I went back downstairs, and I texted my fiance about it. About 20 minutes had passed, and he hadn't responded, which I understood because, he was busy at work. He hadn't opened my message, so I knew that he probably hadn't even seen it yet. That's when I heard yet more creaking upstairs, and I started to feel a little irritated. I really hated that I was feeling spooked, but I couldn't help it. I ended up turning the TV off and going into the kitchen to get something. That's when I heard a rattling from upstairs, and I immediately began internally freaking out. It was unmistakably the sound of our sliding mirrors moving. So if you were too rough, they'd make a loud banging/rattling noise because one of them was a little too loose at the bottom. Now, I've watched my fiance play enough horror games, and I've seen enough horror movies and heard enough stories to know that I'd be a complete dumbass if I stayed a second any longer in that house. Thank God I brought my phone into the kitchen with me, because I then immediately ran out of the back door in the kitchen, along the side of the house, and then ran into the street. I just bolted. I then called the cops and told them, "I think someone's in my house." The operator asked me if I was inside, and I told him I was outside. He told me to stay away from the house and stay on the line with him until the cops arrived. I was terrified, and I was rambling about how my fiance was at work and had no idea what was going on, and also how I was scared and I was just being stupid, and I was really sorry if I was wasting everyone's time. The operator tried his best to calm me down, and I was only waiting about 10 minutes before the police then arrived. They searched my house and the surrounding area, but they didn't find any intruder. However, they did find evidence that someone had been inside my house. One of the cops had went right inside my closet, and what he found still makes me sick to think about. Some of my clothes had male DNA on it. Yeah, the sticky substance you're thinking of is exactly right. It was on some of my clothes that were hanging up, as well as on the closet door and the back of one of the sliding mirrors. I don't know if the mirror rattled because the intruder got excited and hit it by mistake, or if he intentionally moved it. I was glad I got out of the house when I did, especially because he was clearly a sick pervert. A cop then drove me to my fiance's work, and he actually called me when we were on the way to his work. I told him what happened, and he immediately left and met us outside his workplace. He just hugged me as I cried into his shoulder. The cops had theorized that the intruder had escaped via one of the back doors. I hadn't locked the conservatory one because I had to take stuff out of the tumble dryer later, and I felt secure not locking it. There's a gate at the bottom of our garden, and you can run along the back streets, so the cops thought the intruder must have escaped that way. Since they had DNA, they assured me they'd do their best to try and find the creep. My fiance and I stayed with his parents for about 2 weeks after this incident because I was just way too scared to go home. I wanted the locks changed, so we arranged for that to happen. I also vowed to never leave any doors unlocked, as well as to never do any laundry with any doors open or unlocked. After weeks of waiting, the cops had told us that they caught the guy. It turned out that he apparently had a record of committing similar crimes. He was known as a peeping Tom, and he'd actually been in trouble for petty thefts and for following women around. My fiance was furious that this weirdo was actually allowed to mingle with the public. His address was half an hour away from us, but apparently he liked to travel outside of his bubble to spy on women. He'd usually jerk off in the bushes or in his car watching them, wherever he could catch a glimpse. This was actually the first time that he'd ever went inside someone's home. It really freaks me out to think that he may have been stalking me. He must have been watching me to know that I would leave that door open, to know I was out there doing laundry. I don't know how long he was watching me, but it still gives me major anxiety to this day. We changed our locks, and I'm now very paranoid about locking all of our doors. It scares me to think that he was in that closet hiding in the side, knowing I was in the room. The creep was actually sentenced to some jail time, but only for a few years. It doesn't feel like enough. My fiance has been a huge supporter throughout all of this, and in a weird way, dealing with this actually made our relationship stronger. So to the creepy pervert who snuck into my house and jerked off all over my clothes, I really hope I never encounter you again, and I hope you receive all the karma you deserve for doing those disgusting things. Please stay safe, everyone, and don't ever make the same mistakes that I did. It doesn't matter how safe you perceive your area to be. Always lock your doors no matter what. And if you feel like something is off, listen to that feeling. It's better to look stupid and be wrong than fall victim to something horrible. Stay safe. I'm a 36-year-old male, and I live in a ground floor apartment in a seaside town in England with my girlfriend. This incident occurred on a Saturday night. I was home alone because my girlfriend was having an evening out with two friends that she hadn't seen in a couple of months. I'm a night owl at heart, so I like to stay up late on the weekends, and I wanted to wait up anyway just in case her or her friends needed me to drive them home instead of getting a taxi. I'd planned to catch up on some YouTube videos and maybe play a game on my laptop. It was about 10:30 p.m. when I heard the sound of my front door handle moving. I paused the TV and listened, and I heard it again. It sounded like someone was rattling my door handle very quickly. I was confused because I wasn't expecting my girlfriend to be home or call me to pick her up until closer to midnight. So I headed to the door and looked out the peephole. The noise had stopped by the time I reached the door, and when I looked out the peephole, my blood then froze. I saw a man standing further away from my door, facing away from me, so all I could see was the back of his head. It looked like he had his head in his hands. I got a bad feeling in my stomach, and I decided to pretend that I wasn't home, figuring it was just some drunk idiot who got the wrong house. I went back to watch TV, but I had kept the noise lower than before. About half an hour passed, and I heard the same noise yet again. I was very on edge, and I immediately shot up and headed for the door. I decided this time that I'd open it, and I didn't ask him what the hell his problem was. I did just that, except when I opened the door, the guy just gave me a bewildered look before backing away. When I opened the door, I said to him, Look, man, I don't know who you are, but I saw you trying to open my door earlier. If you don't leave right now, I'm contacting the police. I didn't recognize this man as a neighbor, and his eyes looked tired, with black circles underneath them, and he looked solemn. I stood there watching him as he backed off, before he went to the entryway to our apartment block and just sat there, head in his hands. I went back into my house, but before I did, I then said, "Just go home, man," and then shut the door. I wasn't sure if I should call the police because I didn't want to waste their time if the guy simply had the wrong house, which I felt he maybe had since he looked at me so confused. I shot a text to my girlfriend explaining the situation, and I told her to make sure she calls me when she wants to come home because I didn't want her to get a taxi and risk running into the guy outside. I told her to not cut her night short, and I was fine picking her up at any time, and that I'd drive her friends home too if they wanted. I knew she wouldn't be out until 4 a.m. because we're both too old to party like that nowadays, but I didn't want her to cut her night short either. I ended up turning the TV off and just sitting on my phone until my girlfriend called just after midnight to say that she was ready to come home. When I went to go get her, the apartment entryway was now empty, as were the stairs leading to the upper floors from what I could see. I didn't see the man again, although I was very vigilant walking along the street to my car. When my girlfriend and I got home, she told me that she thought that he was probably just a drunk and trying to get into a friend's house, and I agreed, although to me he looked more tired than drunk, but I guess you never really know. I have no idea if he knew someone in our apartment block or if he really was trying to do something more sinister. I just hope that he never comes back, and I'm really glad that we always kept our front door locked and bolted, because if I had it unlocked that night, he could have waltzed it right in and done God knows what.
In 2006, my family and I moved into an old house. It was at least 90 years old and was in pretty good condition for a house that old. My parents bought the house as it was near the middle school I'd be attending and was convenient for both of my parents to get to work on time. Most of the time, I'd be home after I got out of school as my parents would still be working. I mean, sometimes one of them would get off early and come home, but that was rare. My parents didn't feel a need to get me a babysitter as I was 11, which some may argue as being too young to stay home alone, but I'd like to think of myself as mature and responsible. On top of that, being home alone would also guarantee some me time to get things done. Whether it be doing homework, playing video games, or even just neatening up the house, there'd always be something to do. One day, my parents had told me that they wouldn't be back until much later as my mom was going to go out with some friends and my dad was working overtime. I didn't mind it, of course, and told them to go do their thing and told myself that I would just treat this night like any other night I was home alone. On this night, there happened to be a thunderstorm which really set the vibe when being alone. Anyway, my mom leaves at around 5 and my dad is still at work. Having the whole house to myself, I take an hour to study for a science test and play a few video games on the Wii. With it being the early 2000s, the Wii console was the hottest thing of the year. Those who grew up during that era will probably know what I'm talking about. Mid-game, I start to feel a little hungry and decide that I'd pause my game and go downstairs to grab a snack. As I make my way down, I notice the hall light that leads into the kitchen had been turned on. This was particularly strange as my parents never leave any lights on as they're very strict about saving electricity, so I was surprised they had forgotten. Anyway, I make my way down the stairs and turn into the kitchen where I see a man crouched down by our food pantry. He's holding a hammer in his hands that he obviously took from my dad's toolbox. I cover my mouth and slowly back away and went back upstairs to call the police on the home phone. I try to speak very softly into the phone and tell the operator that there was someone in my house who I didn't know, The only description that I could give was that he was tall and wearing a white shirt. Being only 11, my description was anything but helpful. The operator had said that it could take a while due to the extreme weather, but to just hide for as long as possible. I go into my closet, trying my best not to make a sound when I hear heavy footsteps come up the stairs. All the while, I'm praying that he doesn't find me, as there was no possible way I could take him even if I tried. Then, as if things couldn't get any worse, they did. He's now at my door, and he's lightly tapping on it, asking to come in this deep tone of voice. The more he knocked, the more his voice changed into anger. He then starts pounding on my door saying, "You know I could break this door down too easily, right, little girl?" At that point, I'm screaming the word no repeatedly when I hear police sirens coming down my street. However, that didn't seem to faze him, as he kept pounding on my door before police came in, tackling him to the floor. I hear a lot of commotion happening outside my room before I hear a light knock on my door. I screamed, telling them no and that I didn't want to die. After I said that, I hear a female's voice tell me it's okay and that I could come out. I ever so slowly opened the door and was greeted to a female police officer and 3 other male officers restraining the man. He was even taller than I thought, maybe 6'6", and his eyes were bloodshot crazy. The female officer hugged me and calmly asked me if I knew this man, to which I replied with a no. Apparently, this guy had walked into my house through an unlocked door and made his way into the kitchen. Long story short, they take him away while I see him being forced into the backseat of the police car. The look on his face that day is something that will never leave me. It was a look of pure hatred, as if the first thing he'd do once he got out of jail would be to come back for me. My parents never left me home alone again until I turned 15. Even though I'm a lot older now, I still have fears of being home alone, and I always have to tell my fiancé to remember to lock the doors when he leaves for work. It's crazy to think that a childhood fear of mine still stuck with me throughout adulthood. I have kids now, and they will never go through what I went through. I would still sometimes get nightmares about that incident where he would always be banging on either me or my kids' doors attempting to kill us. Sometimes he succeeds. For context, I'm a female, and this happened just last week when I was in my first semester of college. I attended a community college right near my house, as it was more convenient for me to get to and from school. Anyway, last week I had just gotten home from my first day of classes and threw myself onto my bed to relax. Being at school for long hours was enough to make me exhausted, and sleep was the only thing I was looking forward to. I get some shut-eye for a good hour or so when I woke to my dog Mia barking. This was weird as she almost never barks. I have a dachshund, big bark, small bite, and was the sweetest thing anyone could have, so when I heard her barking, I definitely thought it was strange. I dismissed it as her just barking at someone walking their dog or cat. However, it wasn't until her barks went from annoying to defensive, and that's when I get up to see what she was barking at. I could then see her barking into my parents' bedroom. She has her head up while barking as if she were barking at a person. The only problem was that there wasn't anyone there, even though she clearly knew something was there. At this point, I'm officially creeped the hell out while trying to get her to snap out of it. As I was about to approach her, she squeals back as if she was hurt or scared. I take a look at her and I see this minor gash above her stomach where I then covered it. Thankfully, there wasn't that much blood, but it still hurt her to say the least. I grabbed Mia and ran out of that house so fast to call the police. When my parents got home, I had told them about what had happened prior to them arriving. However, my parents are the type of people to take everything so lightly and lectured me about how I haven't been sleeping well enough and that it was all in my head. I know my story sounds crazy, but I saw it happen. I don't care if my parents believed me or not, as I know what I saw. Nothing has happened since, and my dog has gotten back to her normal self. This is by far the scariest thing I've ever seen, as I still can't find the words to explain it. I've had a few people tell me that it was just my dog being dumb, while others say it was something paranormal related. All of these theories were valid, but unfortunately, the second one seems more plausible. I'm not sure what exactly happened, but what I do know is that my dog obviously saw something in that room that I couldn't see that terrified her.
When I was an infant, I was in a freak accident where a gun in the back of my parents' pickup had actually misfired and the bullet went through my mom's wrist, both top and bottom, and then the bullet entered through my left foot right on the side and up through the top. I still have my foot and I got super lucky. Fast forward about 34 years. It's now March 2018. I'm battling one of the worst ear infections I've ever had. I had barely slept for days because I couldn't lay my head flat without bawling my eyes out. My fiance Steve had been working construction and he takes sleeping meds in order to fall asleep. So we go to bed on this Thursday night as he had to work early in the morning on the Friday. I was finally beating the ear infection, so this night I was totally out, sleeping so heavy for the first time in days. I awoke to a noise but just assumed Steve was getting up to go to the bathroom or something. So I dozed right back off, but then I heard yelling. I'm in a brain fog and my brain isn't awake or processing anything. I heard more yelling, so I remember jumping out of the bed and standing up in the dark, and I was able to comprehend that it was Steve yelling. For some reason, I thought that maybe the cops were in my house or something, but the first words my brain actually understood were,
"Give me the money."
Wait, what? The cops don't yell that. What the hell's going on here? Steve is buck naked in all his glory, charging at these assailants, and then he slams our bedroom door, trying to keep them from getting into the room where I am. These bastards try swinging the door open, and Steve slams the door shut again. All of a sudden, I start hearing popping noises. Which were actually shooting at us. I watch Steve Spider-Man around the room, trying to not take a bullet, but keeping our door shut so they can't get to me. I hear Steve yelling, "Get the gun! Get the gun!" And my brain is thinking, why on earth would I charge these intruders and get their gun? Like I said before, I was sleeping super hard and the brain fog in my brain in stupid mode. I finally realized that he's talking about getting our gun. Yeah, I'm a dumbass. So I click the light on, grab our gun, and then hand it to Steve. These junky piece of shit intruders have now ran out the very same way they came in, through the back door. Apparently my idiot roommate hadn't locked the back door. Anyways, I'm now shaking and I'm damn near hysterical at this point. Steve was grazed by 2 of the 6 bullets that had been shot at us. I spent an entire month tending to his wounds and nursing him back to health. We also got a dog and we installed a home security system. I sometimes still put a chair under the doorknob some nights, and I haven't had a good night's sleep in like 2 years. Most nights, Steve would have slept right through anything due to the meds, and I would have woke up to them. But by some miracle, he heard them first and protected me and himself like a true hero. He wasn't even supposed to be home yet. He was supposed to be in Florida until the next week, but came home early. I absolutely tremble at what these 2 armed robbers would have done to a woman all alone sleeping heavily and having no clue that they were there until it was too late. I think that I'm cursed, or that the people who love me the most always end up having to take a bullet for me. My mom did it first, and now my fiance has too. It scares me to tears to think that anyone that's close to me keeps having these freak gunshot incidents just for being close to me. To the dirty scumbag piece of shit intruders that broke into my house and took away my sense of security, I really fucking hope karma gets you.